I've watched a lot of people destroy themselves, but I've never seen anyone do it faster than Susan did on a Tuesday afternoon. 60 seconds flat, under fluorescent lights, in front of a stranger's phone. By the time she reached the parking lot, her life was already over. She just didn't know it yet. I need to be honest with you about something before I go any further. I'm not a journalist. I'm not some stranger who found a viral clip and decided to dissect it. I knew Susan, not closely, but enough. Enough to recognize her voice the moment my old coworker sent me that link with no caption, no explanation, just a video 60 seconds long. I watched it once. Then I watched it again. Then I put my phone down and sat very still, because something in that clip was bothering me. Not the screaming, not the way she leaned across that counter. Something smaller than that. Something that had nothing to do with what she was saying. At the 7-second mark, right before her voice rises, she glances toward the door. Not at the cashier, not at the small gathering crowd. She looks directly at the exit, just for a fraction of a second. Then she turns back and keeps going. I've watched those 7 seconds probably 40 times now, and I still don't know what to make of it. Most people didn't notice it. The comments were all about the screaming, the entitlement, and the cashier's composure. Nobody was talking about that glance. Nobody thought it mattered. I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I started asking questions. I reached out to someone who was in that store that day, not the cashier, someone else. And what they told me didn't match the video, not entirely. There was a gap, a small one, but the kind of gap that, once you notice it, starts to feel like the only thing worth looking at. I'm going to tell you what I found, not the version the internet ran with, not the 60-second clip that turned her name into a punchline. The full version, the part that existed before someone hit record, and the part that nobody covered after. Because here's the thing about viral moments. The camera always starts too late, and in this case I think that was the point. The witness's name was Diane. She'd been browsing near the back of the store when it happened. She saw the whole thing, or at least that's what she told me when I tracked her down through a local community forum 3 days after the video went viral. We talked for about 20 minutes. She confirmed most of what the clip showed, the raised voice. The cashier is staying calm. A small crowd is forming near the entrance, but then she said something that stopped me cold. It was strange, she said, because honestly she seemed fine when she first walked in. I asked her what she meant by fine. She paused. I mean, she was just standing there, quiet, almost too quiet, actually. She wasn't agitated, she wasn't rushing, she was just waiting, and then something happened, and then it all started. I asked her what that something was, another pause, longer this time. I couldn't really see from where I was standing. That was the gap. I started looking into Susan before the incident. Not deep, just surface level at first. LinkedIn. A few local business articles, the kind of digital footprint a senior manager accumulates over 20 years without really thinking about it. What I found was unremarkable, deliberately unremarkable almost. Senior position at a financial services firm. Consistent tenure. A profile photo that hadn't been updated in 6 years. Recommendations that all said the same things in slightly different words. Detail-oriented, driven, professional, but one recommendation had been removed. Recently. I only noticed because the numbering skipped. 7 were visible, but the section header said 8. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know what it said. I noted it and kept moving. A former co-worker of Susan's agreed to speak with me off the record. I'll call him Mark. He'd worked under her for about 3 years before moving to a different firm. Mark didn't hesitate when I asked him what she was like. Controlled, he said immediately. Very controlled. She was the kind of person who never let anything show at work, never. I asked if that was a good thing. He thought about it longer than I expected. It meant you never really knew where you stood with her, he said. She smiled the same way whether she liked you or not. Then he mentioned something he called a throwaway detail. The kind people offer at the end of conversations because they've almost forgotten it. The morning of the incident, Susan had received a phone call at her desk. Brief, maybe 2 minutes. She'd taken it standing up, which was unusual for her, and when she hung up, she left the office without telling anyone where she was going. That was at 1:14 p.m. The video was time-stamped 1:47 p.m., 33 minutes. No one knew where she was or what she did between that call and the moment the camera started recording. Welcome to SorrowNest Tales. If you're enjoying the story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I went back to the clip that night, watched it again from the beginning. The cashier, the crowd, the glance toward the exit at the 7-second mark. And then I noticed something I had missed every single time before. A woman is standing near the entrance, partially cut off by the frame. She's not watching the confrontation. She's looking down at her phone. She arrived before the recording started, and she left before it ended. It took me 4 days to find her, the woman near the entrance, partially cut off by the frame and gone before the video ended. Her name was Patricia. She worked 2 doors down from the store, a small insurance office she'd managed for 11 years. She hadn't come forward, hadn't commented anywhere online, hadn't told anyone she was there. When I reached her, she was quiet for a long moment before she said anything. I was wondering when someone would call. Patricia didn't give me everything, but she gave me enough to crack the version of events I'd been carrying. She told me she hadn't entered the store by accident. She'd followed Susan in, not following her in a threatening way. She was careful to say that. She'd seen Susan in the parking lot and recognized her. They weren't friends. They knew each other the way people in a small professional circle know each other. Names, faces, the occasional nod at a local event. But Susan hadn't nodded that day. Patricia said she'd called out to her across the parking lot. Susan turned, looked directly at her, and then walked into the store without a word. That's not like her, Patricia told me. Susan was always almost aggressively polite. It's the only way I can describe it. So when she just looked through me like that, I thought something had to be wrong. So she followed her in, stayed near the entrance, watched. She said Susan stood at the counter for almost 90 seconds before anything escalated. 90 seconds, the video doesn't show. I asked her what happened during those 90 seconds. She said the cashier made a phone call. I pushed her on that. Hard, she didn't know who he called. She couldn't hear the conversation from where she was standing, but she was certain. The cashier picked up the store phone, spoke briefly to someone, and then turned back to Susan. And that's when it started. That detail doesn't exist anywhere, not in the comments. Not in any of the articles that ran the story, not in the cashier's own account, which I'd read in a local outlet that interviewed him 2 days after the clip went viral. He never mentioned a phone call. I went back to that interview, read it 3 times. The cashier described the incident as unprovoked, a customer who became aggressive without warning. He said he followed store policy, stayed calm, and that was the whole story. Simple, clean, consistent. But then I found something buried under a support post that the store had made after the video spread. A comment, no profile photo, posted and deleted within the hour. I'd screenshot it before it disappeared. It said, "You should ask why she was really there that day. It wasn't about what everyone thinks." The account had no followers, no history, one post, that one. I traced it as far as I could and hit a wall. But here's the part I couldn't shake. The part that changed everything I thought I understood about that 60-second clip. The account had liked exactly one thing before it was deleted. A photo posted 3 weeks earlier on Susan's personal Facebook page. It was a photo of her office, her desk, her nameplate, and written across the bottom in her own caption were 2 words. Last day. The post went up on a Friday. By Monday it was gone. No explanation, no follow-up. Just deleted, like it never existed. The people who saw it assumed she was moving on voluntarily. A quiet exit, a chapter closing on her own terms. That's not what happened. Mark called me back 2 days after our first conversation. He said he'd been thinking about what he told me and there was something he'd left out. Susan hadn't left her firm voluntarily. She'd been pushed out, quietly, carefully. The way large institutions remove people they no longer want is without creating legal exposure. No termination letter, no formal process, just a series of shrinking responsibilities, redirected projects, and finally a meeting with HR where she was offered a package, a handshake, and a very clear understanding of what would happen if she made noise about it. She had been there for 22 years. She signed the paperwork the same day. Mark didn't know the full reason, but he knew the shape of it. A younger director had been brought in above her 8 months earlier, someone with different priorities, someone who, within 2 weeks of starting, had quietly begun reassigning Susan's core accounts. Her team shrank from 9 people to 3. Her calendar, once packed, started clearing itself. She never said a word about it at work, not once. That's what I keep thinking about, Mark told me. 22 years and she never let it show, not for a single day. I asked him how she seemed in those final weeks. He was quiet for a moment. Like someone waiting, he said. For what? I didn't know. The phone call at 1:14 p.m., the one she took standing at her desk before walking out, I traced as far as the information would allow. It came from her husband's office, not her husband directly, his assistant. A brief call, 2 minutes, the kind that delivers a message someone didn't want to deliver themselves. I found out through Patricia, who knew more than she initially told me, that Susan and her husband had been quietly separating for months. No announcement, no visible conflict, just 2 people slowly removing themselves from a shared life while maintaining the appearance of everything being fine. The call that afternoon was about the house. An offer had come in. Her husband had accepted it without telling her first. So by 1:47 p.m., when that camera started recording, Susan had spent 33 minutes sitting alone in her car in that parking lot. No job, a marriage ending in paperwork she hadn't agreed to, a house being sold out from under a life she'd spent 2 decades building. And then she walked into that store. I'm not telling you this to excuse what happened next. I'm not. What she said to that cashier was cruel, unnecessary, and the damage it caused to him, a 19-year-old just doing his job, was real regardless of what she was carrying. But here's what finally broke me open about this whole story. The cashier's phone call, the one Patricia witnessed before the recording started, revealed who he called. It wasn't a manager. It wasn't corporate. He called the owner of the store directly, by name, without hesitation. And the owner, the person he called in those quiet 90 seconds before everything ignited, was Susan's sister. The sister's name was Carol. She had owned that store for 9 years, built it without help, without investors, without anyone from her family showing up to the opening. She and Susan hadn't spoken in over 2 years, not since a dispute over their mother's estate had fractured something between them that neither had tried to repair. Alex was Carol's nephew by marriage. He recognized Susan the moment she walked through that door. That's why he called, not policy, not protocol. He called because he knew exactly whose sister was standing at his counter and he needed to know what to do about it. Patricia heard Carol's voice through the receiver from where she was standing. She couldn't make out the words, but she watched Alex's face while he listened, and she told me it changed. Noticeably. The composed, professional 19-year-old who had been running that floor all afternoon suddenly looked like someone who had just been handed something uncomfortable and had no choice but to deliver it. He hung up, turned back to Susan, and told her he couldn't help her, not with what she'd brought to the counter, not with anything else either. Patricia said the store went quiet for a moment after that. Susan stood completely still, not the stillness of patience, the stillness of someone absorbing a blow they recognized. Because this wasn't a cashier declining a transaction anymore. This was Carol's voice, routed through her nephew, telling Susan on the worst day of her life that even here, there was no ground to stand on. 22 years at a firm that erased her quietly, a marriage ending in paperwork she hadn't agreed to. A house was sold without her consent. And now her sister's hand, reaching through a proxy, delivers one final wordless refusal. She broke, not forgivable, not with any justification that holds up in the light. What she said to Alex was cruel, directed at a young man who had no part in what Susan was carrying, who was simply standing at the intersection of two sisters and a history he didn't create. The screaming, the public humiliation of someone who had done nothing to deserve it. None of that changes because of what I now know happened before the camera started. But it does change what the video actually captured. The deleted LinkedIn recommendation, the one I'd noticed early on, numbered but missing, I eventually traced to a former subordinate of Susan's who had pulled it down quietly the same week the video spread. She told me briefly that she hadn't wanted her name attached to Susan's publicly anymore. Not then. She offered nothing else. I didn't push her. The deleted comment, the one that said, "Ask why she was really there, it wasn't about what everyone thinks," was posted from a device registered to a coffee shop 2 blocks from Carol's store. I couldn't go further than that, but I noted the timing. Posted within hours of the video going viral, deleted within the hour. Someone who knew the full picture and almost said so, then thought better of it. Carol never came forward, never confirmed the connection publicly. She gave Alex time off, removed certain posts from that period, and said nothing. Whatever her reasons were, she kept them. The video reached 2 million views in 36 hours. Susan's former firm issued a public statement using her name despite her no longer being employed there. They didn't need to include it. They chose to. Her husband's legal team cited the incident in the separation proceedings. Her daughter went silent for 3 weeks. The public, working from 60 seconds of footage with no context, filled in the rest themselves. And the version they built was not wrong exactly. It was just incomplete in ways that mattered. Here's the moment that shifted everything for me. I'd spent weeks building toward the truth behind a viral clip. I kept expecting to find something that would reframe Susan entirely. Some revelation that would make the screaming make sense. A wronged woman, a setup, something that would move her cleanly from one column to another. That's not what I found. What I found was a person who had absorbed an enormous amount of loss, quietly, invisibly, without ever letting it show. And who, when she finally broke, aimed herself directly at the person least responsible for any of it. Alex was 19 years old. He went to work that afternoon, did his job, got caught in the middle of something decades older than he was. And Susan, who had survived 22 years of professional erasure without a single visible crack, chose him as the place where everything finally came out. That glance toward the exit at the 7-second mark, the one I watched 40 times and couldn't explain. She knew. In the moment before she fully committed to what she was doing, some part of her saw exactly where this was going and looked for a way out. She turned back anyway. That's the part the 60-second clip actually preserved. Not a caricature, not a villain, a person who saw the exit and chose the counter. Welcome to SorrowNest Tales. If this story stayed with you, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.